What's going on, folks? Thanks for hitting that download button and checking out a brand new episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade, your one-stop shop for toys, tech, and talk with some assembly required. I'm your host, Rich, and if this is the first time you're checking out an episode, first of all, welcome. Second, a bit about what we do here. Toys and Tech of the Trade is an interview series where we sit down with entrepreneurs, content creators, and awesome folks that are on our radar to discuss the gadgets, the gear, and the tech that they use to run their business, create content, and of course, be more productive. Now, when it comes to the toys aspect of the conversation, it's more than just what are your favorite action figures, etc. Everyone's favorite definition of toys varies. Some people are into jet skis, collecting knives, things of that nature. We use a more general definition of toys here. It allows us to get to know our guests on a personal level. And besides, who doesn't love to geek out about the stuff that they're passionate about? With that out of the way, let's get into some housekeeping and turn it over to this week's guest. First and foremost, I have to say that obviously it's been a couple of weeks, a lot longer than a couple of weeks with regards to new episodes, but there has been a ton of stuff going on, which I'm going to actually touch on in its own dedicated episode because I don't want to take away from this week's guest. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to this week's guest so you can learn about the toys and tech of their trade. My guest for this week's episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade is an entrepreneurial evangelist. He is also a soldier, a creator, and a slew of other things, including a podcaster like yours truly. I look forward to sharing the toys and tech of his trade. Jason Skeesick, welcome to the show.
Rich, thank you so much, man. I'm excited to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Your biography is just one of those that are only reserved for people that are incredibly creative, because I always talk to people that when they are creators, whether it's in the podcasting space or in the artistic space, they have a resume that just goes all over the place. You know, you were a soldier. Thank you for serving our country. You're a father. You're a content creator. You're a coach. You're so many things, but I want to start with the baseline, which is obviously your career in the military, because obviously that creates the discipline that leads to everything else. And what moved you to join the service? Did you have family members in the service, or was it something that just kind of worked its way into your orbit?
That's a great question, Rich. So you already mentioned the spear and clover. And if you're watching the video, I have a tattoo on my forearm of a Spartan spear and kind of an infinite loop of rope that I call the spear and clover symbol. And it leads right into why I went into the military, because I needed to. The Spartan, the clover represents spirit of the puppy, which is like outgoing, friendly, fun, tries new things, but also kind of ADD, shiny objects over here, over there. You know, that's why I've had a kind of a diverse background. I had to go into the military, Rich, to find discipline, to find the ability to keep track, to stay on track, you know, duty, discipline, loyalty, things like that. I don't know if I was ever disloyal, but in the military. And so that's what I did. I went into the military pursuing a job as a network engineer, which is awesome. And if you're in the Army, what that means is they hand you a shovel and a pickaxe and you dig holes in the desert. You put in conduit and you pull cable all day. And so it sounds a lot sexier than it is, but I'm so thankful for that experience, because it taught me how to work with a group of people that couldn't quit their jobs. They came from all different lines of areas of the country, and we had to get this mission accomplished. And so it's an incredibly rewarding experience when it's over. And I'm very happy.
What was the reaction when you told your family you were going into the military? How was that approached? Usually, because those reactions vary based on whether you have military in your DNA or you don't. So that's always a big driver with that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually don't have direct, my parents, neither of them were in the military, but my grandparents both were. My grandfathers both were. My mom knew that I needed it. I think she was sad. I think she was sad that I had to go, but I think she knew that I needed it. My dad had always wanted to be a soldier, so I think he was a little bit more okay with the decision. At the time, I just had no direction, and you know, I have a lot of possibilities that I could do in this world, especially when I was 1 years old. And so I think that everybody involved knew that this would probably be the best thing. And sure enough, it certainly was. It was definitely the best decision I've made.
Now you lean into the fact that you felt that you needed it? And I want to unpack that a little further, because that's a very big moment of clarity for someone when they're young. Like, I'm kind of all over the place. I need to go someplace where there's structure. Usually that ends up happening when you get sent to like military school or you get put someplace because your parents or, academics see that you're just not, you're not disciplined enough. But for you to come to that realization on your own, it's a ballsy thing. But more importantly, you were self-aware enough to say, this is the path I need to take. What was that light bulb moment where you were like, the military might be the move for me?
That's a great question. And it kind of goes back to why I'm an entrepreneur. I didn't realize this though, Rich, until I was in my mid-30s. But I can tell you now, I have the cheat code. I can look back and see it. I've always been an entrepreneur. When I was a kid, I loved snowboarding. I worked at the snowboarding hill. I loved skateboarding. I worked at the skateboarding shop. I loved cars. I worked at the car shop. I loved clothes. I worked at the mall. Well, turns out I loved pool and poker too. And so right out of high school, I was playing a lot of competitive pool, gambling, and then eventually started playing poker. This is right around 2003 when people were all excited about the World Series of poker and everything. And I was good. I was good at it, but I was a bad gambler, which means that I would win, and then I would lose. And so this thing where I take the thing that I'm really excited about or passionate about and I turn it into a business, I've had that my whole life. And so at the time, the alternative to the army was, let's continue to be a degenerate gambler that's 21 years old and losing money that he doesn't have. And I was staying up till 11 in the morning. I mean, it was a very clear, I wasn't doing any drugs. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't doing anything, wrong aside from the gambling, but it was just one of those things where it wasn't helping anybody. I didn't even really have illusions that I was going to somehow, become wealthy from it. It was just kind of this, vicious cycle that I was stuck in. And honestly, the military, it's just that's a little canister of whiteout when you talk about your permanent record, right?
That's right.
Wipe it out and then start fresh. And that's exactly.
What was that like in terms of being in the military? Did you ever run into instances, and I ask this for different people that are in the service because it does happen, where your will was really tested, where you said to yourself, man, did I make the right choice? Is this it? Am I going to make it? Did you have that?
Only time that I can remember as a over 18-year-old person having a breakdown was in the military. And what happened was, so first of all, yes, I am someone who now has become a good listener, but that is not my default setting, Rich. My default setting is speaking. And so standing at attention when somebody is intentionally, misrepresenting something to try and get under your skin like a drill sergeant might, was very, very challenging for me, and certainly had some moments where I just couldn't help, but talk back. And certainly that paid the penalty for that. But the thing that I would think of was an actual breakdown was there was a period of time where we were in the desert. We were digging holes, like I was describing earlier. It was like 7, 12-hour days every week. And it was 115, 120 degrees out. Pretty brutal. And it's really, really hard labor. And there was this one comfort that I had given myself. And at the time, as a young man, I felt entitled. I was like, I'm working so hard that I'm entitled to this one thing. And that one thing was, technically, I could wear this jumpsuit. It was like a flight suit instead of my uniform because it's so freaking hot. And I think it's a reasonable compromise as a human being, right? To be like, I'm going to wear this. It's flowier. I'll be a little bit of tiny thing, but it wasn't but a uniform that everybody else was wearing. And so I felt like it was entitled. And my sergeant, God love him, who was a great leader, came into my room and he's like, you can't wear that. That's not in the uniform for this unit. And I'm like, but it is. And I lost it. We were like 8 months into this very, very difficult, very, very stressful deployment. And I just, like a baby. Wow. I was like, oh, I'm not going. I'm like, you're going to have to lock me up.
Oh, man.
Lost. I've never, and so listen, man, as I'm even telling this story, there's just hundreds of thousands of much worse stories that people have lived through. But this was a moment for me where it was like, that was where I broke. I broke that moment. And, to his credit, he recognized it for what it was and kind of let me take a breath and get my shit together. And then he put it on me a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to look at it like this, I think, and I'm a firm believer, iron sharpens iron, and pressure creates diamonds. And think about it. You went through that breakdown. And if the leader of the unit would have folded and would have said, we're throwing you in the brig, or you're being insubordinate, or they would have discharged you. Everything you've accomplished thus far would have been undone because of a jumpsuit. And I'm sure you reflect on that now, like, man, you know, like that's, and you know, I had a soldier a while back. We were talking for a podcast, and he said, you know, military kills your inner bitch. You know, he was like, he's like, you know, you get in there and it's, you know, you get carved out in there. And I remember he was talking about training for Paris Island, and he was like, you know, you ring that bell, you go home. And I was just, man, you know, like it's intense. And I can imagine, especially doing that, you know, you're running cable, you're in the desert, a million things could go wrong between the elements, whatever's out there, and, you know, the element that's out there. It creates a bunch of variables. Did you ever run through those scenarios in your mind? Like, man, what am I going to do if I'm out here and something pops off? Like, how are you wired for that? Because I ask, because those types of situations create a different level of awareness than day to day.
Yeah, it's a great question. So for starters, what I did wasn't combat, but what I did was we lived just like everybody down there lived in the middle of a war zone. And so, you know, there was mortar fire coming in every day. There was things happening around us that were very unpleasant, right? We lived right next to a prison. So we'd go to lunch, and there's 12 guys on their knees with black bags on their heads. Yep. And I think honestly, at that age, I was cut out for it. Like very quickly. I mean, we'd be playing I remember one day we were playing basketball, and orders were going off, and you could hear them kind of walking in, and nobody really stopped playing basketball until it got to like pretty close. And then we just kind of like grabbed our stuff and went over. They have these little bomb shelters everywhere. But yeah, I don't know, man. I think in those situations, there are times where you ever had like an MRI?
Yeah.
There's that moment where you go like, this sucks that I have to sit in here and I can't move, and
I'm claustrophobic. It is utterly insane.
Okay. I'm glad I picked that example then, because it's like, we're here now. This is what we're doing. And I can either choose to be in terrible, terrible anxiety and upset and or I can fucking play basketball. You know what I mean? Like, and so that's what we typically did, is we would just play basketball. I mean, there's again, like, I don't have like wild stories, and certainly.
Oh, of course. It's a wild situation though.
It is one of those things where you live where you live. And I think about like the people that are currently going to work in Ukraine or something like that, and trying to make a life, you know, while all that stuff's going on around them. And it's like the resilience of humans, man. I don't take credit for that. You know, it's literally just you wake up and you go to work. You have to, and all sorts of things can happen, and you just don't really think about it too much. You know, what we would do, it's funny, I know you're like a toy guy. What we would do is we would talk about comic books. We'd talk about, what would you do? What would you do if you got $1 million, bro? Mm-hmm. I mean, like, there's like 3 things that we talk about every single day. You know, what would you do if you won the lottery? What would you do? What superpower would you have? And how much money would it take to make you do something kind of wild? And that was pretty much on repeat, man.
Now, I want to talk a little bit as you're winding down and you come out of the service. What was your mindset like when you came out? Because a lot of people sometimes they have a tough time, and I use this analogy, they have a tough time plugging back into the matrix. Like, think about it. You're in the military. There's a schedule. Everything is boom, 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 boom. You wake up and you're like, damn, I need a job, you know, like, or man, I got to pay these bills, or I just have to acclimate myself to being amongst people that don't operate at the same level of efficiency that I'm used to. How was that? How was that first, you know, month or 2 out when you were back home?
Nailing that. I mean, for starters, I had one of those things. The other 2, I didn't. I was very much career focused when I was in the military. So I was reading, honestly, it was a little misguided, but I'm glad I was doing it. I was reading all these entrepreneurial books, all these finance books. I had a subscription to Forbes while I was in the Army. I mean, like, I, in my mind, and tried to enact this when I got out, thought I'm going to get out, I'm going to go to school for finance, I'm going to become this titan of industry. And so when I actually hit the ground, I was using a BlackBerry with the little pearl in the middle. I had no laptop. I had no computer, and I was editing PDF documents on my phone and sending resumes. I had an apartment and I had a job before I touched down in Chicago after I got out, but it took a ton of legwork on the other side of it before we got out. I think that was definitely something I was proud of at the time. But you're dead on about it feels like I'm moving in fast forward and everybody else is moving in jello.
Yep.
I remember that very distinctly. There's a few things that I remember, that one in particular, but there's another one too. I remember getting out and having spent 4 years, just to set the scene, I didn't have a girlfriend. I had friendships. I had hard work. I had honor. That's what I had when I was in the military. I didn't do anything that I wouldn't look somebody in the eye about. And so I just remember getting off the plane or getting back released into Chicago. And I was walking around town like this, like looking for eye contact. I remember that feeling of being like clean, man. And it's not that I've done anything that I'm not proud of or really like lived in a way that I'm not proud of, but that feeling is rare in life.
Yep.
Where you're like, ask me anything about anything. And brother, I'll slap you on the back. We can have a beer and I'll tell you.
Yep. You're a clean slate.
Yeah. It was I remember feeling it at the time, even being like, the word is like pure. Clean slate is a good one. No, yeah, that was interesting. But yeah, I couldn't stand standing in a line at Starbucks or, walking down the street and people are like, oh, tripping all over their own feet.
Mm-hmm.
That I could definitely remember things being like, and that probably led me into being an entrepreneur because I figured, oh, screw this. I'll just build it myself.
Right.
With my buddies, and then of course that habit even bites you in the ass.
So, you opened the CrossFit gym, which I want to get into. That it's interesting because, the gym industry, much like the restaurant industry, chew you up and spit you out. Everybody comes in, I'm going to have the best equipment. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Then you can't get people in the door. And then before you know it, you have a room full of multi-million-dollar equipment and a lot of bills. What sparked you wanting to open that type of a facility?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was in the military, I lost some weight and got in great shape in basic training, but they teach you how to eat really a lot in basic training. They teach you to eat as much as you can. And then I went to AIT and I gained 50 pounds on biscuits and gravy.
That'll do it.
So I was like 360. So I spent the first year getting fat and then I spent 3 years getting in shape. So I kind of had my fitness journey throughout the military. And so then when I got home, my friends and I found out about this thing called CrossFit. I've actually never belonged to anybody's CrossFit except for my own. Yeah, because we went to the CrossFit in town. Shout out to CrossFit Chicago. And it was like $220 in 2010. And so I was like, I'll just start my own. And so we found a place. It was $1,000 a month for the three of us split that and then, started having some clients. And that's how we ended up in CrossFit. We, I think to your point though, about the industry chilling you up and spitting you out, fitness, maybe like podcasting, fitness is one of those few businesses where people will get into it not for money. People will get into it to change the world. People will get into make people fitter. People will get into spread the word on fitness or because of a strong passion. And the unfortunate thing, maybe the most like tragic thing about fitness is I've talked to 1,000 fitness experts,
right?
That are true blue, world-class trainers, coaches, personal trainers, whatever, strength and conditioning folks that can't take a vacation, that can't retire when they get older, that can't, afford to have nice things or buy a house or have a nice car. And it's because they think that caring about their clients is going to be enough.
Yep.
And so I think it's one of the few businesses where we come in and we think that just the fulfillment of it is going to be enough. And that's just not the case. And that's kind of what I've helped people to do for the last.
I think that's a very big statement. I tell people all the time, it's like, listen, the love of the game is great. And it's what helps you get up every day, helps you put your shoes on and go out into the world. But the bank doesn't want to hear you're a nice guy or a nice girl or a nice person. The bank just wants to know you got money in this account to pay these bills. It's that simple. Your personal struggles, your sacrifices, none of it matters. And the thing about it is that as somebody that got into that industry, got into the podcasting industry, it's exactly that. You kind of have to be comfortable being uncomfortable with not having a 7-figure bankroll. Like you can get there, but the amount of diversity you're going to need to get there is not what most people are prepared for. Because if you think about it, you open up a CrossFit gym, you were scratching an itch for yourself physically, but in the same instance, you still got to get clients. You got to pay the bills. You got to make sure everybody has the right clients. You got to make sure everybody's coaching is universal enough that it can get people in the door. And it creates other challenges because you want to keep that like to your point before, that structured approach, because that's what's going to get people in there. But if you end up working for the sake of working, you're never going to be happy either.
No, your passion turns into a prison, Rich.
Yep.
Because like what happens is you start a company out of passion, you want to make an impact on the world, and then you go and you make the best food in the entire world, but you don't open the doors or put a sign up. You know what I mean? So here you are, you're cooking the best meals there is, you're the best restaurant in town, and nobody knows who you are. And so the two people that smelled it from right outside the door get to experience this wonderful food. That's not how it should be. You need to be able to, your food deserves a bigger message,
right,
in order to impact more people. If you're a fitness guy, your program, your class, your tribe, your impact deserves to have the scalability it deserves. And so it's one of those things where I think we get myopic or short-sighted is what that means, right? Is we think I have to be the one to do it. Well, I can only help if I'm very lucky, 100, 150 people.
Yep.
If I can take what I think to be magic that's stuck between my ears and codify that into science, with frameworks for an employee or a staff, now I can start to impact a few hundred people. Then if I, let's say, and you wanted to look at my resume, started to coach the leaders of other tribes, other gyms, well, now I can impact a few thousand.
That's right.
And then if I decided to impact even more, I'd stop charging people for it. I'd go onto a podcast, and now I can impact a few hundreds of thousands of people over time. And so this is just the scaling up of impact as you level up.
Now, obviously, you're doing that. You're getting a crash course in running business. You have a degree in finance. You worked in commercial businesses. You've done all those aspects. What are some things that over the course of this journey, working for yourself and working for others, has been a constant? And what I mean by that is that there's certain things when it comes to business that whether you work for yourself or you work for somebody else need to be core based. What was something that came along that you noticed working by yourself and for someone else, and even in the military, that you said, this is a value that I need to lean in because it's important?
Well, I think doing what you're supposed to do is like just to work with other people. You got to show up on time. If there's somebody that's waiting on you to complete some work or some part of some project, you've got to fulfill on that. You have to have accountability to the mission that you're on, whether that's in the military, whether that's in school, whether that's in a corporate environment or in your own business. You have to hold yourself accountable to your constituents, right? Whether that's your peers, whether that's your clients, whether that's your partners, or even just your family at home, right? And to me, I found out that I recently, I sold my CrossFit gym, or most of my CrossFit gym. I still have a small piece when I moved to Indiana. And I found out that it's not so much that I'm a CrossFit guy. I am. Shout out to CrossFit guys. I go to jiu-jitsu now and kickboxing. I'm a tribe guy. I'm not a workout guy. I'm not a swimming or Zumba guy. I'm a let's all get together and do wild shit guy. Like, that's what I like. And so to me, it's much more about being next to those brothers and sisters in the room, forming sweat bonds, doing what Robin Lalonde calls elective collective suffering.
That's right.
It's where we agree to come in together and suffer. That way, everything else in our life seems small by comparison, right? And so, that has been a constant, is holding myself accountable to others. I'll fail myself 10 times before I'll ever let you down.
That's awesome. I think that sharing that in particular forces a lot of what I try to really push when I have these different conversations with so many entrepreneurs, is the fact that I always like to say it's same hells, many different devils. Because at the end of the day, think about it. We all have a struggle for a business. We're all trying to grow a business. And unless we align ourselves with, to your point, a tribe or a support system, that you're never going to advance to that next level. I think that a lot of people live and die on the hill of I'm self-made. And it's like, but you're not, Yeah.
I've read Outliers, and I need to read it again. Outliers very much slowly opens the petals of that flower you were just alluding. And by the end of it, he's basically like, nobody else could have been the Beatles. Nobody else could have been Bill Gates. And here are the, many different reasons why that's the case. I rejected it when I read.
Of course.
Well, by the way, but yeah, in hindsight, absolutely not. Now, what I will say is you got to be awake at the wheel. But certainly this is a team effort in all regards.
Yep.
I mean, literally right now, I have a 17-month-old baby sitting in the other room who would be going ballistic if I had to have her on my lap right now.
There you go.
I mean, literally just to even be here this morning talking to you, there's a team.
That's right. Now, of course, that support system is clutch, man. I think that people, they lose sight of the fact that a partner who's willing to be in the shit with you is something too many people don't appreciate, because it's like you just said, like right now you're like, hey, I'm going to go do this podcast. I'll be out in 45 minutes. Like, a lot can happen in 45 minutes that is out of your control, but you have a partner that's like, I got it. Don't worry about it. Boom, you're covered. And I think that people, whether it's personal or professional, they need that. And you need that support system, because that's what allows you to experiment, to fail, to pick yourself up. Because if you fail, that support system is going to say, don't worry about it. You're good. Get back on the horse.
You know what? It's funny. You talk about that support system, and maybe you're listening to this right now going like, I wish I had that support system. Guess what, guys? It's free. You just have to learn how to treat people with respect and how to give them clarity and context as to why we're doing this thing, whatever it is.
Yep.
Whether it's you're leading your team, whether it's you're the involved in your family as a partner or a husband or a wife or a father or a mother, any area as a friend. It's like, we'll kind of do anything for each other as long as we know we're in this thing together. We understand what exactly it is that's going to be required of us, and we understand the context as to why it's important. If we can convey that to people, they will walk over cliffs with you. And I have many, many experiences in my life where that's true for myself and for others.
Now, obviously, you've done all these businesses and then you switch to coaching. And I want to kind of talk about that, because what drew you to that? And I ask this because there's a surplus, and you know this, there's a surplus of coaches. And you're going into it with the noblest of intentions. And then you're like, man, everybody's out there. You got the Tony Robbins, you got this, you got that. How did you realize, like, listen, this is a path I can go on, and I know I can do it differently?
Well, that's a great question. I think for starters, I wouldn't compare myself to other coaches. I think that there's a lot of people doing a lot of good things. I think that it's an industry that has a lot of heat maybe right now. But here's what I can tell you for myself. I can't speak to those folks. What I can tell you about myself is when I committed to my business to be a full-time entrepreneur and not continue to be in a corporate world and trying to serve two masters, when I started to do that, my business shot through the roof. I don't think it's because I'm special. I think it's because I paid attention and I did the things that I was supposed to do, finally. Then, an organization that helped me to do that, shout out to Alex Hormozy and Gym Launch, asked me to become a coach for them. And I loved it. The very first time I got on a call with another entrepreneur, I realized this is what I want to do forever. I loved it. Just like podcasting, I knew even before I ever hit record on podcasting that I'll probably do it forever, because I grew up to podcast. But so with coaching, I've just never gotten off of a phone call with an entrepreneur where I didn't have more energy than when I got on. This is just a fact. And so it's one of those things where I don't know if coaching, first of all, I do think I'm good at it, but I don't know if coaching it chose me, man. Like I come into this situation where it's like, I don't have another choice. I can't imagine not being on the phone with an entrepreneur, trying to help them solve problems or just bouncing ideas around. And so fortunately, I have that's my spirit of the puppy that says, let's go do this. My military science mindset says we can't just do it. We can't just like hop on the phone with people and shoot the breeze, right? And so I've built an entire program that I believe is very, very helpful for folks to build the foundations that will allow them to finally stop struggling in their passion businesses and to find success through, things like frameworks and finding flow. So yeah, to me, I don't think it was a choice. I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I was retired for a year. I didn't have I stopped working last November. I spent the entire year in service. I haven't had a single dollar collected. I haven't had a client. I haven't had a partner. I haven't had an employee. And I paid attention to what I did, Rich. What I did was I spent time with my wife and my daughter. I went to kickboxing and jiu-jitsu every single day for about 3 hours. And I recorded podcasts and I got on the phone with entrepreneurs. That's what I did almost every single day. And so that's why when it was time to start thinking about what to do for this next business, I knew that it was going to be involved talking to folks like you
How did that feel, like waking up and just saying, I have nothing to do today? Because that's a lot of people strive for that feeling and they seek it out. And you consciously went and you said, you know what, I'm going to do this. How was that? Especially because you're wired, again, just work, being of service. How did you, know when to switch that off?
I recommend it, but I wouldn't do it again.
Really? Okay.
So my circumstance is a little bit unique, although not wholly unique. We moved from Chicago, where there's buzz and energy and juice and entrepreneurs and young athletes. I mean, we're hanging out at my CrossFit gym with hundreds of amazing, cool people, and we moved to rural Indiana. Shout out to Ogden Dunes. We're here in the Indiana Dunes National Park now at the same time that I sold my gym. And so because of that, it was a big change for me. It was a change to lose momentum a little bit. I'm glad that I had the ability to do it. I'll never regret being able to launch a podcast, spend more time with my daughter in the first year of her life, for goodness sake. And so those things were all very good. And certainly from like a wisdom perspective, I got to think about, myself and my place in the world and how I can serve others best and all of those things. But as an entrepreneur, man, I'm a seeker, I'm a doer. And so I did get a little bit stir crazy of like, well, I feel like I lost momentum. So much now has been just building momentum as we started to get ready for this launch. And man, looking at my calendar right now, it's like, we're popping, we're ready to rock. And I don't think I would put down
it's like sitting at the top of the roller coaster waiting for the drop.
Yeah, a little bit.
I can imagine. Obviously, as a podcaster, you do the Spear and Clover podcast. What pushed you to even jump into that space? Because think about it, you got coaching, you got all these businesses, you're doing all this stuff. It's like, oh, you know what? Let me just pile on another skill while I'm at it.
Rich, I only work 20 hours a week. So, I got nothing to complain about when it comes to effort and time. Hopefully we're making an impact in that 20 hours a week. I was born to podcast. And so that's not to say that I'm good at it. That's not to say that I hate the sound of my voice, all sorts of stuff, like everybody, right? But when I was a little boy, I went to a behavior disorder school that was about 40 minutes away.
Okay.
I was year round. And so every morning I would ride in the bus. The bus would come pick me up and it would be a 40-minute in and 40-minute out. And she listened to talk radio. And then at night, especially through like middle school and high school, my mom didn't want me to do this, but I would sneak my little radio and I would listen to Loveline. And then I would listen to Art Bell in the evening.
Yeah. I remember those.
Brother, Art Bell was Joe Rogan to like version 0.5 or whatever.
Yep.
Like it was, conspiracy theories and time travelers,
aliens,
shifters, aliens. And the thing about Art Bell, not to like divert here, but the thing about Art Bell that was so great, by the way, I think he might still be doing that show. The thing about him that was so great is he would never like push back. He'd be like, wow, so you're an interdimensional time traveler? What's that like? Yep. He was such a great player about that. So then from there, I go to the military. What am I doing? I'm listening to Audible books every single day. I just have always, I used to go to spoken word with my mom when I was coming of age. I've just been a spoken word guy my whole life. I will pick that over music almost every single time. And so I knew, just like I knew I would love jujitsu years and years before I ever did it, I knew that when I carved out space in my life to start a podcast that I would enjoy doing it. And I'll tell you right now, if I didn't enjoy doing it so much, I would just focus on being a guest because this is easy, man. I get to show up to it today, talk to you, Rich, have this great conversation, pull the pin on the grenade and just walk out of the room.
That's it.
Yeah. And so if I didn't love it, I wouldn't, take the time and effort to produce an episode and promote it on social.
Yeah. I think that's a big part of it. I think that to your point, the being surrounded by that kind of makes it a no-brainer to kind of want to explore it because much like you, like my mom used to listen to Art Bell. I'd hear it in her radio while she's sleeping. At, 2 a.m., Loveline with Dr. Drew was a big thing. It put me on to, Dr. Drew and who was the comedian that was with him?
It was
Adam Carolla, who ended up becoming like a massive force in podcasting later on. And then here in New York, it was O&A and Stern. So once you're surrounded by that stuff, it kind of, I always tell people, it inadvertently weaves its way into your thought process. And you go, yeah, man, I draw inspiration from that. And it's funny because if you listen to a lot of podcasters, they always, I want to say like 25 to 30% of them sound or try to deliver like Rogan does. Because they're so used to listening to Rogan or used to listening to like Tim Ferriss or used to listening to, so they approach it similar or Jocko Willink. And you kind of see that and you're like, those guys weave their way into your framework. And the thing about it is that when you do that, you don't have to imitate them. I always tell people, it's like, listen, take the silly putty they give you and mold it into yourself. Like, don't automatically just become a carbon copy of that guy, because that guy's success is exactly that, his success.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think for me, and this goes, by the way, for like social media too. I respect Layla Hormozzi.
Yep.
Wrote this one time, and she was like, "Hey, if you're just sharing somebody else's memes, you're not adding any value. That's just you're a copy machine, right?" I don't remember how she said it, but it just occurred to me like, yeah, if I read a book, if I read Extreme Ownership by Jocko and I read 4 Hour Work Week, those are different messages, but it's my job, if I want to be a professional at this, to synthesize those two ideas through the dialectic and create this new third point of view. And so much of my career has been that, when you can do a thing, you can sort of hold it up and see it from one direction.
Right.
When you start to teach a thing, now you have to, by definition, explore it in all different angles. And so it gives you a depth of knowledge and of understanding. It's just so much more thorough and complete. And I think that that's what we try to do in the art form of podcasting, which is why inevitably, whenever I go for a speaking engagement or meet a bunch of entrepreneurs, particularly like the LinkedIn crowd, they're like, "Ooh, I think podcasting's pretty hot. I'm thinking about doing that." And I'll be like, "How many hours every week do you listen to podcasts?" Because no shit, I'm listening to 20 hours or more of podcasts while I'm awake. And I go to sleep with podcasts too. So it's like, I know I sound like a maniac here, but that's just me and my natural habitat.
Listen, I've been doing this since 2006. So I know, I know exactly how that is, man. Yeah, man.
You just blew my mind, Rich.
Yeah, man. It's been a long ride. So, yeah.
Stop. What were you doing in 2006? That's unbelievable. What was your podcast about?
I was doing a podcast called My Take Radio, and honestly, it was scratching a creative itch. I loved comic books. I loved video games, but I also loved MMA and I loved pro wrestling. So what I did was I created a podcast that brought those four things together under one show. So I did it as a podcast. And then in 2009, I started doing it as a live call-in show. Same style, like terrestrial radio. No, we used Blog Talk Radio. They reached out. They were like, "Hey, man, we got this call-in service." And I asked a buddy of mine to be the call screener. And 416 episodes later, we were, we crammed out, talked to different professional wrestlers, mixed martial artists, video game personalities, people in the film industry. It was wild. And then that served as the foundation to start like our podcast network. And everybody that ended up writing for the website we had got the podcasting bug, and then I taught them how to podcast. So
you're my hero.
Yeah, it was wild, man.
Freaking legend.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
2006.
Early. Yeah. It was early, man. Just a Logitech microphone and Audacity and speaking into the void and hoping for the best. Yeah. Crazy stuff. I wanted to ask before we move into the next segment, being a father now, what lessons from fatherhood have you brought into your business? Because it's a life changer, man. It changes your entire perception because you stop working for yourself.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that well. I think patience. I think podcasting and parenthood has given me patience.
I agree.
And I think that as coaching, I think coaching is interesting because in phase one, let's say you come about coaching in the right way, which means you're a subject matter expert. You've had success in the field that you actually want to help people in, which I think is like table stakes, right?
Yep.
Like you should at least have been there a little bit.
Right.
And so you step in the front door and step number one is like, I have all the answers, just listen to me. And that's just not the most effective way to do it. You really, if for that to work, somebody needs to be so like immensely coachable and honestly, oftentimes not have some of the characteristics you want them to have. You want an entrepreneur to have like a point of view and strength and like courage of vision and things like that. And so if you actually want to impact like really strong entrepreneurs that can really make an impact on the world, you need to find a way to like become a part of their team and be shoulder to shoulder with them, not face to face. We're arguing, we're illuminating. And so very quickly, or not very quickly, but over time and through parenting, where there's just no logic built into that system yet, but through parenting and through podcasting, where I have to listen and not just wait to talk, not just think about what I'm going to ask next, but really actually listen and react to the person that I'm engaging in this conversation with, has made me a much better coach, because now I'm actually present in the conversation. I'm actually on your side, and I'm not convincing you to do the things that I think you should do. I'm helping to persuade you to do the things that you know you should.
That's right. I think that one of the things as a parent is we're door openers for our kids. And I think that people kind of lose sight of how that applies to life, because think about it. When you're closing a coaching client, you're closing them on the basis that, listen, I'm going to help you open a door to a creative endeavor, to a business venture, to your next big idea that you weren't 100% sure of, that I'm validating for you to help you open that door and take that next step. And I think that as parents, we do the same thing, because if you think about it, it's like, you're teaching your kid, hey, don't be scared of that dog, or hey, this is how you walk up the steps, or hey, you're going to fall. It's okay. And I think that people don't take those lessons and really break them down to basics for the next part of their journeys. So, the fact that you can see that is great, man, because so many people just don't take lessons in the real world and apply it to their business like that. They're like, oh, I read this book, I heard this podcast, I watched this talk, and this is my entire identity to lead my business. And it's like, listen, Steve Jobs was a great leader, but Steve Jobs was an asshole. And I think that that's what people kind of, they're like, yeah, man, or look what's happening with Twitter, like everybody thought Elon Musk is this amazing innovator, and, the people that are getting fired from Twitter beg to differ.
I don't know, man. The Elon thing, I think, is too current for me to really comment on. But one thing I'll tell you is I think anybody could be an amazing coach. And I think this is interesting, because there's what does an amazing coach really do? Do they tell you what to do, or do they ask you questions that ultimately reveal what you should do? And I think the people, now don't get me wrong, let's maybe draw some lines to kind of clarify what I mean here. There are people that are, I would call tactical gurus or tactical teachers, or people that basically sell you a playbook, right?
Right.
I'm going to teach you how to run marketing. I'm going to teach you how to structure your classes. I'm going to teach you how to build out, a salon. I'm going to teach you where the seats should go and where the plugs need to be. That's a different thing. That's not what I'm referring to. If you're teaching somebody how to do something, this is just a modern way for us to convey information. It's an alternative to college, right? If you say hey man, I'm a pizza shop owner, I've opened 20 of them, they're all profitable, I'm just going to show you how to open a pizza shop. That's great. When we talk about coaching, it's much more about standing side by side. You think about Tom Brady needing Bill Belichick. You think about Michael Jordan needing Phil Jackson.
Yep.
You need that objective third party to be like, hey man, you're doing great, but do you think maybe you could do this? Do you think maybe you could do that? Challenging them, asking these questions that anybody could ask. Anybody could ask you, hey, Rich, I know your business is going great, but let me ask you this. If I sent you all the growth you could possibly handle, what part of your business would break first? That's not a monumental question that I have to come up with in a lab.
No.
But that right there will tell you the speed limit for your business, and it will tell you what the priority is if you want to get it moving again. And so it's one of those things. I have a young guy now, Mo, that works for me. He's my first employee in the new business, and Mo's 24 years old. And he's my brother from another mother, man. He's like a second brain walking outside of my body. And one day I was driving through the Appalachian Mountains. I was on a call with him, and I was just asking him questions. I was like, hey, so how did you do so well in jiu-jitsu and in swimming? And he's answering these questions one at a time. And over the course of this conversation, just by asking him questions about how he lives his life, I was like, dude, you could run a business. You can coach any business owner at any level. The only thing stopping him, because the way he lives his life is virtuous and honorable, and he does the things he says he's going to do, and he asks for help when he needs it, and he works his ass off. He could be a titan of industry. So what remains? All that remains is this ad hominem thing where it's like, but who are you? Because apparently we care about that. And that's right. I understand it's valid, but that's all that's left is the ad hominem thing. Well, tell me about where you're coming from so I know whether or not I should listen to what you're saying, or know whether or not I should answer this question honestly.
That's right.
It's like, hey, that painting's blue. Do you have a background in painting?
It's true. I think that too many people gift wrap themselves in ideologies instead of being in terms of where their paths are going to lead. I think, people are like, my dad was a carpenter. I'm going to be a carpenter. My kid's going to be a carpenter. And it's like, well, instead of doing that, why don't you teach carpentry? Like, why don't you teach carpentry? Why don't you start a wood shop YouTube channel? Why don't you, do custom furniture on TikTok, etc. And then all of a sudden it's like, I could do that. It's like, yeah, why not?
Yeah, I think too, there's, of course, limiting beliefs is a word that I'm sure you and I both use often.
Every day.
And we all have them. And I think same thing as before, there's levels to this game. There's levels to your understanding. And at one level you go like, oh, I found out that I have a limiting belief. But then there's like a whole nother level where you're like, okay, where are my limiting beliefs? Because I get that dopamine when I realize once I remove one or reduce one, I go, oh, wow, this is easier now. And I get more money. Okay, cool. All right, where's the next one? And you start to really, really start to look for them more and more. And honestly, talking to folks like you on podcasting, even I've found has helped me kind of with meta-analysis and stuff like that. Because you hear stuff coming out of your mouth as an answer to a question. And you're like,
oh, there you go.
I think in some ways that's what we provide for.
There you go. I want to just switch gears for a second. I want to get into our hot seat segment. We're going to go through a couple rapid fire questions based on our conversation. First one is easy. What's a typical Monday morning like for you?
So every day is the same for me, except for the weekends, because society won't let me.
Yep.
Every morning I wake up and spend time with my wife and daughter, Lucy, and then I go to jiu-jitsu and kickboxing, sometimes just one or the other, depending on how much time I have with helping my wife and baby out. And then quick shower and lunch. I work from 1 until 5 on productive work. That's podcasting, that's coaching, that's building new products, that's whatever. And then at around 5, I stop. We make dinner. Lucy has bedtime, bath and bedtime, and then Donna and I.
That's a great schedule. Now, obviously with podcasting, I see you got your Shure in there. You got all your stuff. How's your prep work when it comes to podcasting? Are you somebody that has a lot of intricate notes? Do you kind of feel that you just have bullet points and then tackle the conversation as it goes? How's your methodology when it comes to approaching your podcast?
So I would say typically, what is Larry King? I like the Larry King model of, I don't know anything about you and I'm just going to ask you questions. However, one caveat is my good friend now, Ryan Sprague, who's a cannabis coach, fantastic human being. He honored me when I came on his show the first time by this beautiful write-up that had not a single word from my bio, right? And he spent probably 15 minutes just writing, sort of like figuring out who I was and writing, Jason cares about this and he's passionate about that. Really like painting a beautiful picture. And I just realized when he did it, and I stopped the conversation and I was like, dude, nobody honors people unless they're dead or married or something.
Right.
You don't honor people enough. And so I've really tried to make an effort of spending a little bit of time before a podcast just to have a really beautiful kind of honoring introduction for that person. Because what I find is you can see it lift them. They're more buoyant. They're happy to be there. They feel honored. And so that's the only thing that I do for research. And then from there, it's very much like what you're doing here, which is just kind of reacting and engaging and listening.
There you go. What's the first place you go to when you open your phone?
Probably Instagram right now.
Really? That's become the platform of choice, huh?
I hate Facebook. I'm trying to move everything I can to Discord if I can, and the world is telling me not to, but I bet a guy like you will give me a little support on that.
I tell people all the time, I go, listen, man, always make sure that every platform, which is a breadcrumb, leads back to your house, whatever it is, whether it's your website, your mailing list, your Discord, because at the end of the day, if going back to referencing Twitter, if Twitter folds tomorrow and you built your entire identity on that platform, guess what? It's gone. So now what? Now you got to rebuild someplace else. So here's the thing, get people off of there to follow you wherever it is that you want your home base to be and wherever you want your tribe to flourish. And whether that's your own Discord server or, Facebook group, whatever it is, lead them there because clearly that's the only way you're going to make sure that your bag is secured, What's 3 mobile apps you can't live without?
My camera. I mean, I could be lame. My camera, my text messages, and my Chrome, right? I mean,
right.
Those are the 3 things I can't live without. And honestly, I'm struggling to think of anything that I use that I would value other than that.
How much has your camera usage gone up since becoming a father?
Oh my gosh, so much.
Yep.
This mirrorless camera I'm talking to you through right now has been instrumental in being a father.
Oh man, I remember it's like, oh, I used to get a phone with large storage just for my own creative itch, and now it's like, look, now I create folders for every year that my kid's alive, and I'm like, oh, here's year 3. I took 3,000 photos for year 3. There you go. What's something that you recently looked up on YouTube for yourself?
What is the engineering tolerance of Legos?
Really?
Yes. I wanted to know what the tolerance is. This is a great question because it could have been anything.
Yeah.
It is actually something I looked up. I wanted to know what the engineering tolerance for Legos was because I was like, they stick together so well time and time again. Like, is it the material that's like acquiescing, or is it like a certain and it turns out it's like 2 millionths of, it's like two thousandths of a millimeter is the.
Oh man. And the incredible pain when you step on one.
And they're compressed under like 25 tons of pressure.
Wow. And I just learned something new then. What's something you purchased recently that's less than $100 that's made your life just easier or just more enjoyable? Nice. Simon.
Best gift that I've ever gotten. Simon came out when I was like the right age for Christmas.
Yep.
And I got Simon one year, but this is a story. I snuck down before everybody woke up and I opened up all my presents. And so my dad took them all back, locked them in this, the little Harry Potter room under the.
Yep.
And I earned back one present per week. And this was the marquee present.
That's awesome.
This is like stuck in my brain.
That's tremendous. What was the last book you read?
I am currently, so Essentialism is the last book I completed, and I'm currently rereading Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Both of those are like Hall of Fame books.
Absolutely. What was the last TV show you watched with your missus?
We just finished Seinfeld and we started Curb, which is kind of like a routine.
Nice. Obviously, we talk a little tech. What was one of your favorite toys growing up besides Simon?
So I bought a Power Glove for Nintendo when I was really little, and I immediately cut the cable off of it and the gun so that I could play Robo.
That is outstanding.
When I was young, at least. Yeah, man. I think of skateboards. I think of, I played a lot of Nintendo and N64, of course. But yeah, man, I think mostly tech wasn't a big part of it. Mostly I was out.
Nice. Being a kid. Speaking of that, what did you want to be when you were a kid?
I don't know if I could have. I don't know. A ninja, probably. I was hell on wheels, dude. I would like set traps in the backyard with like cinder blocks and like punji sticks dug into holes, and like people would come around the corner and I'd jump on their back and try to rear naked choke them. My dad introduced me to the UFC in 1993.
Nice.
So it was off.
That's tremendous. All right. On the trade side of things, who is your favorite content creator?
Who's my favorite content creator? I mean, I guess Joe Rogan would probably be if the same.
Right.
The person that I admire, I really think Mr. Beast is
tremendous. I started really like appreciating his content over the last few years, and I watched the video where trick-or-treaters came to his door and he gave them a stack of money. And the thing about it was that I'm a very big believer that I dislike social media stunts for the sake of clicks, meaning that you're doing charity for clicks. When somebody does the swipe and pays for somebody's groceries and, oh, that's so nice. I'm like, listen, just do it and walk off. Like, not everything needs to be. And for Mr. Beast, I thought that was genuine because think about it. Any random child could have knocked on that door and they would have got a stack of money. It didn't matter. And that was cool. That was just a great equalizer.
Yeah, I totally agree. But to react to your point about the other thing, when I see some like guy that kind of looks disheveled and some kid walks up and goes, here's $1,000. I'm kind of like, you just kind of bought that dude's dignity.
Mm-hmm.
Leave me alone, man. Like, you don't know my life. I might have a lot of money in the bank.
Yep.
That whole little genre, I think it's just swagger. I think it's just people trying to big time and kind of, conspicuous.
Yeah, it's weird. I just find it so skeevy.
But he's not that way.
Nope.
I think part of it is the glam element of it. He's so over the top and it's so fun, and you can see him having fun giving it away.
Yep.
And there's moments, I think some people are tone deaf to this, but there's moments, the people in culture that we like, when they do wild shit, Steve-O, when they do wild shit, you can see that they're loving doing it, and you're not the butt of their joke. You're
right
in on their joke. Whereas like when you listen to, let's say, the Jerky Boys in comparison to Steve-O or Jackass, when you listen to them, it's like, no, you're the asshole. They're making you an asshole and they're profiting from it.
Yep.
And I think in general, I don't like mean-spirited stuff like that.
Yep. I think, like I said, the Halloween one was good when he asks people if they're subscribed to his channel and then they get like a car or something. Like there was one with a woman, she got a car, and the little kid, her son that was with her, was like, this is the greatest day of my life. And I'm like, man, like that's just, you can't manufacture that. And that's just good-hearted stuff. What's a myth that you feel you pretty much shattered when it came to business or personal development?
I think probably that you have to spend a lot of money on advertising in order to find success.
Hell yeah. I agree with that. What's something you've changed your mind on in the last 12 months?
That.
Really?
Yeah, it was like, I just proved it to myself the other day. So we didn't talk about it a lot, but I'm a financial analyst by training. So I used to analyze companies and determine if they're creditworthy, whether or not we would lend them millions and millions of dollars, right? And so I'm a very, that military mindset, this is not my nature, but I can get into spreadsheets and actually have found kind of the connective tissue where I love doing it. And so I model quite a bit. And one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with is it's easy for me to understand a sales funnel. I spend this much in my advertising. And if you're listening, this is boring, I'm sorry.
No.
I spend this much on advertising. I get this many clicks. I get this many opt-ins. I get this many schedules, this many shows, this many closes. This is my front end cash. This is my long-term value, right? That's a sales.
Yep.
In 10 seconds. But if I ask you how much you make as a podcast guest, or if I ask you how much you make as a referral person, well, there's all this sort of nebulous data that has to be understood in order to really track that. And so it's
absolutely
like, it's things like what percentage of my time are spent, marketing myself organically? What do I pay somebody to manage my social media? How many referrals have I gotten? Have those referrals turned into leads and sales? Well, I actually did that model for myself, and I'd be happy to send you one. Did that model for myself, and I found out that as of right now, today, I'm about in parity with what I would get in my previous business, which was consulting for gym owners. Ads is about $1,000 to acquire a high ticket. I'm talking a high ticket entrepreneur, right? But here's the beauty of that. And something that I think Gary Vee knows, and I think Grant Cardone knows, and I think all those guys that are really doing this, like moving chips on the table, the ads, if I want to go out and buy a client, which I do, here's $1,000 bill. Boom, buy a client. Here's $1,000 bill. Boom, buy a client. This is good. This is a conveyor belt, right? But what I figured out the other day, and it should have been obvious, was let's say it cost me $1,000 to get 4 clients. So I'm spending $4,000 a month just to make this simple. I can spend the same $4,000 a month. I can level up my knowledge. I can level up my ability to edit. I can level up the real audio that I use. I can get a bigger following over time. And by definition, my cost to acquire a client will come down approach zero, because I will spend a similar amount of money, but I will wield a much bigger audience and a much bigger impact. And so I'm giving it away for free here today, Rich. But that to me was like, oh, I'm never going to do another paid ad until I feel like I've capped that out, which
I think that's tremendous that you shared that, because I think too many people get stuck in the keeping up with the Joneses, meaning, you consume, Alex Hormozy's content, Gary Vee's content, and then all of a sudden it's like, I'm going to use Gary Vee's $1.84 strategy. And it's like, you realize that his whole $1.84 strategy is based on you actually doing the work. Like, think about it. There's no ads. There's nothing. It's you going in, DMing, messaging, being active. If you don't have the dispensable time to do that, you've already lost. So it doesn't matter what the strategy is. If you don't got the gumption to do it, it's not gonna succeed. So the fact that you came to that realization is huge, because a lot of people are like, oh, I could just buy ads on Facebook for $3 and I'll get my customers. It's like, yeah, that's awesome. But
I mean, if you could just measure the amount of time and distance traveled that has been wasteful based on shortcuts, buddy, it would fill volumes.
That's right.
Everybody. I want to be a podcaster, but I don't like podcasting. I want to have a social media presence and be an influencer, but I don't want to post consistently interesting information or work on the content. I want to be a podcast coach, but I don't want a podcast. I know these people, man. And it's like, I don't know. Why don't you actually try to find something that you actually enjoy doing? Because there's a guy with a fishing channel that has 1.5 million followers. And it's not because he bought Facebook ads.
It wouldn't happen to be J&H Tackle, right?
Right. I don't even know.
Okay. Oh no, I'll tell you why. There's a guy, J&H Tackle. He was my best man at my wedding. He has a tackle shop in Oakdale in Long Island, and he's one of the few tackle shops that does YouTube and TikTok and all that stuff. And he's like, listen, I've 10x my business.
Are you familiar with Ammo?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah, so Ammo is a detail shop.
Mm-hmm.
He tells a documentary story. We uncovered this Porsche 911 1969 in Chet's barn.
Yep.
It's been out of, nobody's seen it since 1978.
Mm-hmm.
It's all covered. And he takes you through this whole journey. And by the end of it, it looks showroom quality, brand new. And he's got it. That dude gets it, right? He's putting the time into doing the thing that he cares about. Jay Leno's garage, man. Jay Leno's a millionaire. And Rogan talks about this, but Jay Rogan's a millionaire. And he was doing something he didn't give a shit about. You watch him on Jay Leno's garage and he knows stuff the mechanics don't know, cares about it. He's interested. He's getting down on his hands and knees and looking under the car. He's a kid in a candy shop. I want to be that way. I want to be in a business where that's how I feel about what I do.
100%. Last one. How do you handle failure, and has the way you handled failure changed over time?
Yes, it has. I look for struggle now. So I think there's 3 levels to this. There's one, and I'll use the metaphor of being in the car. You're in the car and somebody cuts you off and you just get hot, angry. And if you're like me, you pull the car over when you're 17 and you stand out on the road and you fight that person, right? Like that's like level 1. This is hopefully in everybody's rearview mirror. But if you're listening to this and that's where you're at, like, take a breath, bro. Level 2 is like, you're driving along, somebody cuts you off and you go like, blah, 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 you get really angry. And then you go like, serenity now. And you like dial it back and you calm down. And then level 3, which I've only recently hit, and I'm not always there. I'm not, the Buddha. Level 3 is like, I hope somebody cuts me off today so I get a great story. And it's like, I'm actually going out looking for struggle at this point, because struggle is the thing that breaks my current homeostasis and lets me accelerate into the next level. And so to me, I actually hunt for struggle. No good stories, Rich, start and end with everything went according to plan.
I agree 1,000%, my friend. That is a badge of honor I'm proud to wear. Last segment of our conversation, we like to call Reach One, Teach One. We frame it differently for everyone. You're chosen to speak in front of a group of high school seniors, some of which are going into college, some of which are going into the military. What's one piece of advice you would give them before they embark on that journey?
The bigger your impact that you want to make, the longer you should expect for it to take.
That's outstanding and a perfect way to bookend our conversation. Jason, where can people find you? What calls to action do you have for our audience to help you?
First of all, I want you to go to Rich's page and like his stuff, follow his stuff. If you've made it this far in the conversation, you belong here. This is you're part of this tribe, and he is pouring his heart out and doing amazing stuff for you for free. So go like that first. If you still have any interest, swing by www.spearandclover.com. We have free programs there. You can find me on Instagram as my preferred platform, as I mentioned, at Spear and Clover, at Jason Skeesick. And then across all platforms, I'm either at Spear and Clover or at Jason Skeesick.
Very, very awesome. Jason, thank you truly for taking the time to share the toys and tech of your trade. I am honored to have gotten to speak with you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate having me on.
Man, what a great conversation with Jason. His energy was infectious. He dropped so much amazing information, so many great tools, so many great resources, and more importantly, just a great insight into his mindset, which, again, like I said, with his energy and the infectious approach that he takes to life in general, I not only felt fired up, but I really had just a great conversation with him, and I look forward to speaking more with him in the future. Make sure to check out the Spear and Clover podcast so you can enjoy all of Jason's great stories and conversations with other renegade entrepreneurs. And we'll make sure to put links to that in the show notes for this episode, as well as links to everything Jason and I discussed. As always, full disclosure, some of those items may contain affiliate links, which if you click, we will receive a small commission at no additional cost to you, which of course goes towards continuing to deliver great content via our various platforms, whether it's the website, the podcast network, this podcast, or any place else we may be. That's where those affiliate dollars go. So every click on one of those links, we truly, truly appreciate. As always, if you want to keep up with RageWorks, the RageWorks podcast network, toys and tech of the trade, feel free to punch those in your social media platform of choice and you will find us, because we are pretty much everywhere at this point. Even Pinterest. Last but not least, if you'd like to be a guest on a future episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade, and share your stories with us and our audience, feel free to email me, rich@rageworks.net, or visit the Rageworks Network. Fill out the contact form there, and we'll get back to you and schedule you and share your story with our audience. I love talking to different people from different walks of life that just operate very differently, because there's a lot of great lessons you can take from their stories, and there's a lot that we can learn from each other. That's enough of me running my trap. Let's get out of here, and I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you for all your continued support, and we'll see you next time on Toys and Tech of the Trade. Toys and Tech of the Trade is part of the Rageworks Podcast Network, your source for rants about gaming, entertainment, and the works. Visit us at rageworksnetwork.com.